Hello everyone, welcome to this global GEG broadcast. We'll be making a start shortly, and while we're waiting for everyone to arrive, why not head into the chat, let us know who you are, where you're from, your Twitter handle, and if you've got any questions that you'd like us to answer during the course of this evening, let us know there as well. Also, if you haven't already done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button to make sure you stay up to date with all of the events being organised by us at Global GEG. We'll be making a start really soon. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. We are both here, Emma and I, because we are super excited for an event that we're going to be having today on fun and fantastic ways to engage your learners online. I am Amber Trout, the GEG Colorado leader. I'm also an instructional coach here in Colorado. Emma is also in Colorado with me in Fort Collins. And the best thing about what Emma is going to show us today is she's been doing this for a while now. She works at a hybrid school in Fort Collins. So what better way to share what she's been doing in this kind of crazy situation that we're in, because she's already been doing it. She does part-time online, part-time in class. And so she has tons of great insight on all of that. Emma is an innovator as well as a Google trainer, and she was actually in Abbott's innovator group. So
London 19.
Yes, I'm super happy to have you here. And I think that we were raving about you earlier about how great you are and the things that you've been doing. So we're not going to be disappointed, I'm sure, today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking at the live chat and I see some Colorado Springs. I think that's probably your influence, Amber, waiting to see other Colorado folks, but I see people from Louisiana and California. Hello, welcome everybody. North Carolina, good to see you all. Anything else before I get started?
No, you can tell them a little bit about what you do if you'd like, and then I'll pop your screen up here so you have those ready to go.
Awesome. All right, I'm just going to jump right into, I'll jump into the slides, and I have a slide to introduce myself. So this is fun and fantastic ways to engage students during remote learning. I hope it's fun and fantastic for you and your students. I just want to address that during remote learning piece. If you are anything like me in our district, we have no idea what the fall is going to look like. We have no idea what the winter or the spring next year is going to look like. So hopefully whatever I talk about today can apply to whatever model you are in. You might be in a hybrid model. You might be back in school with social distancing measures. And there's definitely a good chance that everything, gets locked down again and we go back to remote learning. So I'll focus mostly on kind of the more tech-heavy side of things and how to engage with students in an online environment, just because that's kind of the way that we need to adapt most with this crazy COVID world. But just keep in mind that I think a lot of what I talk about today, we can use kind of no matter where we are physically, or at least that's my hope. Amber's going to share a link to the slides with you today. I'm kind of designing this session like a big brain dump. I think a lot of people who join the GEG communities are usually pretty tech savvy already and don't need a ton of instruction in terms of like how to, do step-by-step processes and how to find resources to learn through those processes. And instead, I'm just going to provide just a lot of ideas for you about different tools you might use and different ways you might use them with your students. So all of the links to everything I'm using are in the notes section of my slides. Feel free to use those as I talk, follow along, do your own thing, or use that as a resource later. A little bit more about me. My name is Emma Pass. Hello. I'm on Twitter at Emma B. Pass, and that's where I'm like most active in terms of keeping people up to date on the types of trainings I'm doing and things I'm posting and ideas and all of that good stuff. So assuming a lot of you are on Twitter, that is where I am. As Amber said, I'm a Google certified everything educator, trainer, and innovator, Go London 19. And I'm also a teacher. This is the logo for my school. And here's my little school building in Fort Collins. We are called PSD Global Academy, or PGA for short. And we are a public school in the district. We're not a charter school or a private school. We're a public school of choice, meaning nobody is kind of captured into our district by location, but they choose to come to our school. And we're a K through 12 hybrid school. So although we're one building, we kind of have 3 distinct schools within the building. We have an elementary school, K through 5, a middle school, 6 through 8, and then a high school, 9 through 12, all operating on a hybrid model, meaning in some form or another, our students spend about half of their time at the school building and half of their time learning remotely at home. This might sound like the exact model a lot of districts around the country are about to adopt kind of for a COVID-19 response, but our school's actually been around for about 10 years, if you can believe it. We started as an entirely remote online school, and then it evolved into this model just based on the needs and the desires of the students and community to have some of that independence for online remote learning, but then also have that physical place of connection and physical place for community. So I love my job. It really feels like the best of both worlds. And as like an ed tech geek, I just have so much opportunity to use these tools that I'll talk about today. This is our schedule in like a pre-COVID traditional world. Keep in mind, this is our middle school schedule. So elementary and high school kind of have different versions of this. On Mondays and Fridays, our students are completely remote and online. Typically, that means they're at home learning and being supported by a parent or grandparent. Sometimes students will kind of combine on those days. So small groups of students will meet at somebody's house or even at a cafe or kind of a public location to learn together on those days. Then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they are on campus all day. It's a really traditional school day. They have their periods and they go to lunch and PE and art and music. And then on Wednesday, we kind of have a hybrid day within the hybrid model, which means half the day, the first half of the day, our students have the option to come to campus. We call it an open lab, and it's a very flexible environment where students are able to work individually. They can work in small groups, in pairs. They kind of choose where they work. And then teachers also have the opportunity to pull individual students or group of students for interventions or small group work. And then the second half of the day, they are working again online. So that's just a little bit of background in terms of where I'm coming from and my perspective. I also like to start with this model to pre-teach these 2 terms. Maybe at this point, you're starting to get familiar with these words. Definitely become kind of like hot topics in recent months. But the 2 different ways that we can teach. And really, it's how we can teach whether we're online or whether we're in person. But in particular, when we're teaching online, we talk about either teaching synchronously, meaning we're all teaching and learning together at the same time. It's what we do in the classroom. It's also what we're doing right now over this webinar, right? I'm delivering this information, you're all receiving it together, and we're learning synchronously. Versus asynchronous learning, which is typically a pre-prepared lesson that I post for students on a learning management system, and they have more choice and agency in terms of when they access that and how long they work on that. I think asynchronous learning is definitely one of the biggest benefits to a hybrid model, is giving students more choice and agency in terms of how they learn, how long it takes them, in what order they do things, how they chunk their time, how they manage their time. And I think it's also a model that we can start incorporating more and more into traditional teaching as well. So I'll probably mention these 2 terms a little bit as we go, synchronous and asynchronous, just so you know.
Emma, there is a great question that someone had just asked about, has it helped students become more independent in their learning from what you've seen so far?
Absolutely. I think, again, this is one of the benefits to a hybrid model, is our students that come to our school definitely need a ton of pre-teaching and support in terms of how to organize your time, different tools you can use, models, and a lot of times there is a lot of scaffolding around that. But by the time they're in 8th grade, it's pretty incredible to see those students managing their work, moving from one side to another, making their choices, using their resources. And I really feel like it's preparing them for, more of a real world experience of how we engage and work in the real world. So I think it's an amazing model, and I hope that we see more hybrid models kind of pop up in the future as a response.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much, Emma. Go ahead and continue on. I just thought that was a great question to ask because you've been doing it for a while, so you would know. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess I would also just mention really briefly, it's definitely not for every student. There are students who thrive in our model. And there are students who don't do as well. So, you know, we know that though, because we're educators. Not every model works for every student. Our session today, I'm going to break up into 4 parts. Virtual spaces, so how to create engaging virtual places to meet online, how to start the year virtually, how to stay engaging during your actual delivery of instruction and content, and then how to keep students engaged in kind of a greater community feel, especially when you don't have a physical location. Again, keep in mind, I'm going to be focusing more on if this is in a remote environment, but you probably could apply a lot of this back to your traditional brick and mortar classroom as well. So we'll start about creating an online virtual space. And of course, because we are in GEG, the first one we'll talk about is our learning management system, Google Classroom. It is what I use in our classroom. I find it easy and intuitive, and our students prefer it to other learning management systems that we've tried to use. So when we're creating our Google Classroom for remote learning, how do we make it a place that students want to log into, that they're excited or curious to log into? My philosophy is always, can I get them onto my learning management system? If I can, they're one step closer to doing the work. So that's our first goal, is like, just get them there, get them to open their computer, get them to click on Google Classroom, because students have a lot of choice when they're at home, right? They don't necessarily have somebody directing where they go. So we have to make it a little bit more fun and engaging. The first thing I'll recommend is using your banner. At the top of our Google Classroom, we of course have these nice like graphic design stock images provided by Google, which are perfectly fine and dandy, but we have this big swath of space here that we can use to really engage or inform students. Here's an example of a Google Classroom banner I used. My students named themselves. In this case, the 7th graders named themselves Gary. And so I did a Google image search for Gary from SpongeBob, and that was our classroom banner for a while, right? To kind of give us a sense of community, and they loved being Gary and calling themselves Gary. You can do the same thing with GIFs. These are the dimensions that you have to search within a Google image search to find, you know, like a long enough GIF to fit that space. But those are really fun and engaging as well. Alternatively, you can create your own classroom banner. I have a template linked into this slide deck. So if I click, oops, I thought it was linked into there. If you click in the notes section of this Google Classroom template, you'll get, again, this exact dimension in terms of the kind of panoramic shape that you need to create a Google Classroom banner. And from there, you can add your own images and your own text to create a whole number of banners. So you could go with that class name theme and create like a custom banner. You could also create posters. So if you're really missing your 4 walls of the classroom and you really rely on visual cues for your students, just create a classroom banner. In this case, this might be something I use at the beginning of the year, where I'm just reminding our students of class norms. We use this kind of like SOAR model, so safety, ownership, achievement, and respect. Or I could make it into an anchor chart. So we're working on an essay unit. Maybe I just post our banner as this 5-paragraph essay structure. So they get that visual reminder every time they log into Google Classroom of what I would typically have on the walls as an anchor chart. You've also probably, if you're on Twitter, aware of the Bitmoji craze, creating kind of a physical classroom space and then putting yourself as a Bitmoji as your teacher in that space. I have a little video here just demonstrating how easy it is to take this template from the kind of Google drawing I provided for you, change the text on the chalkboard. So you could update this every week or every day with the day's agenda, and then maybe a kind of fun Bitmoji that correlates to that day's work. Right into this Google Classroom banner theme. You download that as an image and then upload that to your Google Classroom banner. Although it seems a little slow right now, I think this whole process took me 1 minute and 30 seconds to do, which in the scheme of things really isn't that much time, right? It probably takes just as much time as physically writing those day's announcements on the whiteboard in your class. And I think the more you do it and the more practice you get, the quicker it will be. So here is the final product where I'm resizing the banner. Ta-da! And now I have a different classroom banner. So again, you could consider changing these banners based on the unit you're doing. You could change them daily, weekly, kind of up to you. The only thing I would say to keep in mind is that the color scheme changes within Google Classroom based on the color scheme of your banner. So it might be worth considering trying to stay within the same color scheme, just so your students keep that consistency in terms of your Google Classroom looks the same every time they log on, and just that banner is changing at the top. And so one more time, there is a template here for you to get wild and create your own anchor charts, posters, or Bitmoji classrooms here in the banners. Moving on with Google Classroom engagement. Still on the stream here below our banner, we of course have this space for announcements and communication. And I just really like to encourage teachers to allow this to be a place for conversation. I know some teachers who it makes them a little uncomfortable to kind of allow students to talk about other things that are non-academic related on Classroom. But if you think about it, social and emotional learning is really an important piece of what we do at school. And so in the absence of hallways, in the absence of lunchrooms, can we provide that stream space as a place for communication? It definitely comes with some pre-teaching on my part in terms of what's appropriate to post on Google Classroom. I show students how I can see deleted items, and we talk about digital citizenship and digital footprints online. And I also show them that I have the power to mute students, and I have the power to, limit posting on the stream. So I give them all the information up front, and then I really encourage them. I say, post your favorite YouTube videos, post your favorite memes, post jokes, post questions for each other. Because again, if they're interested to see what each other are doing on the stream, they're just one click away from that classwork tab. And sometimes that's all they need to get them there and get them to do that work. And plus, it's great for, classroom community. So I encourage you to use that stream for conversation. I also kind of prompt conversation on there. So I'll ask community questions. I did a series where I posted a picture of myself with every house plant I had in my house, which then prompted students to post pictures of themselves with every house plant they had in their houses. Just fun and interesting things to do, again, to engage them in this virtual space. And then I'll also mention engaging them with the rest of the spaces in terms of your classwork tab or your assignments. Any text space can be, you can utilize emojis. I don't know how I want to phrase that, but you can copy and paste or use an emoji keyboard in any place you can write text. So if you are in your classwork tab, consider adding emojis to your topics as well as to your assignments and instructions, just to make it visually appealing. And this is something I'll keep talking about as we go, is design is a huge part of engagement, right? When we see a boring black and white block of text, we're not that enticed to read it. But if we see something colorful, if we see something visual, we are more, willing to engage with that. It's a lot like eating, right? Eat with our eyes first. And the same thing goes for online spaces. So utilizing emojis or icons to kind of brighten things up here in your LMS. Aside from a learning management system, you might consider creating other virtual spaces for students to meet. So in terms of teaching, we use Google Meet to kind of provide that synchronous live instruction to our students. But we also create Google Meets for our students to just socialize in. We have lunch rooms that we turn on every day for half an hour, and students have links to those. A teacher is kind of like there in the background, but not really engaging. And you can see over here, we have a picture of our students this past spring eating and chatting and hanging out socially in their Google Meet lunchroom in between classes. So that was, I think, a nice thing to do. Again, keep them engaged, keep them excited about coming to school. A couple other kind of wild ideas. My friend Eric Cross, who teaches in San Diego, introduced me to the idea of using more of a virtual reality space. There is a website called Hubs by Mozilla, and I have a little video here. If you want to watch this later with the sound on, you'll see. But this is my husband and I in a virtual room. And the neat thing about it is you can actually walk, kind of like approach somebody in the room. And the closer you get to that person, the louder their voice is amplified in their microphone, versus the further away you get from that person, the quieter it is. So an opportunity to maybe have people having multiple live discussions in the same space at the same time. It's definitely a little chaotic. Like, I don't know if it's just because I'm not super in tune with virtual reality, but it's not the easiest thing to use, but there's a lot of cool features, as you can see. You can project your camera, you can chat, you can draw, you can insert images in this shape. So it might be just something fun to play around with, if not in an educational way, in a social way, and provide that for your students as well. The last thing I'll mention about creating virtual spaces for classroom is one that I'll do with some trepidation because I haven't personally tried this yet, but a lot of my students use a site called Discord. Typically they use it for game playing. They do a lot of like virtual video gaming together, and they communicate and collaborate on Discord. And they've encouraged me to use it in our classes. So upon research, I found that there actually are plenty of educators who are using Discord for video chatting and conversation and just creating a virtual remote learning space for their students. So this is one that I would attempt, particularly if you have students who are already using it and it's a space they feel comfortable with and it's a space that they're likely to engage in. There might be data privacy restrictions with your district. I've got no idea. So definitely check that out as well. And that brings me to the end of my first little chunk on how to create engaging virtual spaces for students. Amber, any other questions?
Yes. So let's see. I was looking at some of the ones that people were asking. How people are using Discord, it sounds like. But let's see. Was there a good one? Did you see one, Steph? I saw one and then the chat went crazy and then I forgot. They were talking about, though, building culture in their digital classroom. And I know that a lot of teachers were saying how they loved how you were making banners to build classroom culture, how you were giving them those steps up front and letting them know how to do this in a digital classroom. So I think people were sharing their ideas on a lot of that.
Awesome. And I'll just reiterate in terms of how to introduce virtual spaces to students. My favorite process is to get them logged on and let them explore. So give no instruction at first and kind of let them go bananas, and then bring them all back together. If we're in a physical space, I would have them, 45 their eyes or close their Chromebook screens and then look at me. And then I go through the tools once they're kind of familiar with the space. And once they've also kind of got their wiggles out, at that point, I'm like, hey, so I saw some of you thought it would be funny to post X, Y, and Z. Let me show you what I can see when you do that.
Well, when something is novel, I feel like even in my classroom when I used to do it, something was novel and new, you had to give them a second to play with it, get all that out before you went into giving them how this is how we use it in the classroom.
Exactly. They've got all this energy and they're just like, I just want to do it myself. Just let them do it yourself and then show them. So.
Absolutely. All right. I don't think we have any pressing questions right now, so you can carry on.
Okay. Next, we're going to talk about how to engage with students before introducing the content. Specifically, how do we start our year? Let's say we're not in person in the classroom. How do we build relationships and how do we build community with students? And again, a lot of these ideas, I think you can apply even if you are in person. I know when I am in person with my students, I tend to do a lot more hands-on, game type stuff, a lot of high-fiving, a lot of throwing balls of paper in the air. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, we're not going to be able to touch any of the same materials. So how can I do this in a safe or a remote way? So a couple of ideas. The first I just like to talk about because just best practice for pedagogy, and it's an activity my students always seem to really appreciate more than I would expect. And that's writing a letter to their teacher and having the teacher write a letter back. I know a lot of teachers already do this, but it's become so powerful for my students, and they always get really excited at the fact that they get to write me a personal letter, and I will write them one back. Traditionally I do this on paper just because it feels more personal. This year I might have us transition to email. It feels a little less personal, but the benefit is that students are getting that practice emailing you as a teacher so that the next time they have a question, they know the process for emailing. They've done it once and it doesn't feel so new or weird to do. I have on my slide deck a link to just a little activity I do for letter writing at the start of the year. It's super basic, but it just goes over like how to format a letter and then some prompts for what you might write in that letter to me. Students sometimes don't write anything about the prompts. Sometimes they're really inspired by those prompts and they really want to tell me about something they think is unfair or something they've accomplished. So I found this really helpful in that letter writing activity. I'm also interested in creating learner profiles for students. So at the start of the year, giving them a space to tell me about themselves as a person as well as a learner. So I've created on Google Sites a template that I'm offering free for people to use. The only thing I have not, and maybe another Google expert could help me, I have not found the ability to force a copy with Google Sites. So this template, you would have to make sure you make a copy of it yourself, so that you're not writing all over the template, if that makes sense. But let's see, if I click into Google Sites, you can see what I mean. So again, just a really basic template where you're asking students to say, hi, my name is this, I'm a student at this school, insert a photo of themselves. And then over here on learner profile, I've got, ask them to insert a banner, to add a paragraph about where they're from, and then to talk about their learning style, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, reading, writing, talk about their interests, add photos, add hobbies. And I like this for a couple of reasons. One, I like to kind of have like a note card traditionally on each student so that you can quickly flip through and remind yourself what they're interested in. I might just do this by bookmarking each student's site, each student's learning profile. So I have a little folder, and I could create a folder on my bookmark bar, and I could just call that learning profiles. Oh gosh, I'm never good at typing when I'm demonstrating. Okay, learning profiles on the bookmark bar. And then throughout the year, I could go to each student's learning profile and just get those little reminders. Hey, how do I motivate so-and-so? What are they interested in? How do they like to learn? Additionally, students could share these with each other as a way to start to get to know one another. And it also teaches them how to use a site like Google Sites, which I do use later on in the year in order to have them create portfolios or have them create blogs. And you might do that all on this one page. So they could have a new page for a blog, they could have a new page for a portfolio, and it introduces them to these skills. But again, I'll just remind you, because I see some people, hello, Anonymous Crow and Ibex. If you do want to use this, just make sure you 3-dot it and say duplicate site. And then feel free to duplicate it as many times as you want for your students or for whoever else. I just haven't figured out how to push a copy yet. Growth mindset. Okay, so that's learner profiles. The next one is an applied digital skills lesson. If you have not yet explored applied digital skills, I highly recommend this site as and I just had this thought. Amber, can you still see everything I'm doing? Can you see me on applied digital skills?
Yes,
okay.
I can see you there.
For a second, I wasn't sure if I showed a window or a tab.
Nope, you're good.
So if you've not already checked out Applied Digital Skills, amazing resource for asynchronous learning, meaning this is a pre-built lesson. It's all video-based. You can send this link over to your students, and it will take them through step by step how to create a poster all about themselves. Teaches digital skills like using Google Slides or using Google Drawings, as well as teaching practical life skills. So besides creating a poster, which is a practical life skill, there are other lessons that are about designing a budget or, designing a resume, like really practical digital and life stuff together. A lot of them are like get to know you focused. And this could be a great way at the beginning of the year when you're kind of like pulling your hair out, trying to figure out how to do hybrid or remote learning. Send this over as a lesson and it will take them through, again, step by step. You can watch the video, they screen share how to do each step. And then at the bottom, When you're done with that step, you just click next. And there's new instructions and a new video. It's just really easy and intuitive. So consider having your students create a poster all about themselves using applied digital skills. And what I like about that is then they could, again, share their poster or share their Google site, maybe depending on your age. Poster definitely more primary focused, whereas a Google site might be more secondary focused. And they can share those with each other. So get a shareable link to your poster, post it to our classroom stream, or post it into our Padlet, or post it into a Google Classroom question. And you have to look at your classmates' posters, you have to look at your classroom sites in order to learn more about each other. So there was that. You could have them, chat in Padlet or chat in Google Classroom, or again, here's an example of post the link to your poster, post the link to your site in that Google Classroom question, and then they have access to each other's and they can look at all those links and make comments.
Emma, I had a quick thing because you're doing all these different graphics in there. There are these very cute, simple graphics, and people are dying to know, where are you getting these graphics for your learner profiles and for all of this?
Yes, the Noun Project, and I have a whole slide about them later.
Okay,
so, but
perfect.
Just from the Noun Project and their kind of Creative Commons, you'll see I subscribe, so I pay, I think it's like $40 a year to use them, but you can use them for free as long as you cite the author as well.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad you're going to get to that because people keep asking, so keep going.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so Google Classroom question, share about each other, get to know each other. And at this point, you might be thinking, okay, but my students probably will not look at everybody else's poster, or they probably will not look at everybody else's Google site, which is why I would consider creating a guessing game where students are quizzed on knowledge about their fellow classmates. So raise the stakes a little bit and maybe gamify it a little bit. There is another applied digital skills lesson that teaches students how to create a Google form quiz within this pre-built lesson. And it prompts them to make a quiz about themselves that they can share with their classmates. So that's one way you could do it. Another way you could do it, and this is what I'm planning to do in the fall, is I'm going to have all my students create a multiple choice trivia question about themselves based on that poster or based on that learning portfolio that they created about themselves. So the classmates are really going to be quizzed. Did you look at everybody's profile? Because if you did, you'll do really well on this quiz. If you did not, you're not going to do so well. And then I'm going to use quizzes or Gimkit or Kahoot, and they're all kind of doing the same thing these days, to play like a gamified version of get to know your classmates. I've had to do a little bit of thinking about exactly how I'm going to do this. I've created a Google form, which is also linked into our slides. Let me see. Yeah. So down here in the notes section, you'll see this Google form, and you're free to use this as well. This is prompting you to make a copy. So you can make a copy of your own Google form. And what I'm going to ask my students to do is write a question about themselves, and then in a new box, create a multiple choice question number 1. And I'll actually demo this so that you can see exactly what I'm thinking. So question is, do I have any pets? And I could say 2 cats, 2 dogs, or none. Fish. And then I'll ask them, what's the correct choice? So the correct choice is number 1. I have 2 cats. I'll have them submit that. And then on the teacher's end of it, you'll have all of those responses there that you can download to your Google spreadsheet. And then this is going to take a teeny bit of work, but I'll just import these questions directly into quizzes or into Kahoot, copy that question and their multiple choice answers, knowing which one is the correct choice. So I think this will probably take a little bit of setup. It'll definitely depend on how many students you have and how many sections you have. Definitely will be easier for elementary teachers, harder for secondary teachers. But I think this will be a really fun way for us to get to know each other and hold each other accountable for learning about one another. Yeah. And then let's see, I just have a couple more in terms of getting to know you at the beginning of the year. Flipgrid, of course, this is a Google for Education Summit, but Flipgrid's good. It's a great product, really great way at this point for students to maybe start engaging face-to-face, hear each other's voices. Now that some of the lower stakes activities are out of the way, right? It often feels safer to start with text, typing, playing games, and then maybe we're getting more comfortable to the point where we feel like we can record a video of ourselves or record some audio from ourselves. Flipgrid has a whole list of community questions that they suggest using at the beginning of the year, also linked to this slide deck. So feel like maybe just practicing using Flipgrid as a tool through some of these community questions like 2 truths and a lie, or goal setting, summer memories, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, one thing I love to do at the start of the year is like a would you rather game. I think a lot of us do a version of this in our classrooms where you go to one side of the room if you agree with this, you go to the other side of the room if you agree with that, and you stand near the middle if you feel undecided. Potentially we could still do this in a hybrid environment if you're like, if everybody's really responsible at staying 6 feet apart. But an online version of this would be to use Google Jamboard, give each student a sticky note with their name on it, have everybody join the Jamboard. And again, you'd have to have pretty digital responsible citizen students to make sure that they're kind of only using their own note. But if they are, have them each use their own note and pull it to the side of the screen that they agree with. So in this case, you can see that student's pulling their note over there, this one over here, and then I'm asking them to additionally type in their answer of why they feel that way into those notes. So all the students can see where each other lie, and then they can expand upon that and do some practice writing and say, this is why I'd rather live in the country, or this is why I'd rather live in the city. Haven't tried it with students yet. I've tried it with adults. They can do it well. We'll see how students do in the fall. And that brings us to the second kind of piece of my presentation about how you might start the year with students. Any other questions we had there, Amber?
I was trying to look and see, but I think that people were talking about the different ways that they could do that with sticky notes. They were saying Pear Deck was another great way, Jamboard, just some different ways that they're using it. I think that's an absolutely fabulous idea, by the way.
Yeah.
Like
I know, I'm thinking about Pear Deck, and you can obviously drag and drop. The only difficulty with Pear Deck is you have to have them come, if you're doing it remotely, they have to come back to the Google Meet in order to see each other's responses.
Yes.
In Jamboard, you're all in the same window. But if you're in the classroom live, you just can't move around the room, Pear Deck would be, yeah, awesome.
Right. And then you're using computers where you are, right? You're not using iPads, because someone asked about Flipgrid and iPad, and they were saying it's not working as well.
Oh, no. Yeah, we use computers.
Yeah.
Right.
I know. Sometimes with iPads.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's all.
Okay. All right, moving on. Just a little bit about virtual team building once you get to the point where your students are starting to actually talk to each other and are comfortable seeing each other, you know, on video. Because again, it's new. You have to allow students an additional kind of time for them to get comfortable being on video, being recorded, that you might not have to in the classroom, just seeing each other face to face. So I definitely recommend like kind of working up to the video part where you're asking students to kind of put themselves out there on video, but hopefully you get to the point where you are comfortable talking online on video, and you can do some team building over maybe a Google Meet. I have a blog post linked to this slide all about how I organize Google Meet groups within a Google Doc. If you've heard the announcement from Google, I guess we all have for GEG, right? Sounds like Google Meet will begin groups, but as a Google for Enterprise product. So your district will have to pay for Google Enterprise for Education. And I know a lot of districts don't. My district doesn't have Google Enterprise for Education. So sticking with my hacked together version where I have separate meeting links that are all hyperlinked into a Google Doc. You can see a little demo of it here, where I have the link to our Google Meet up top. I have a link to a slide deck that they're all collaborating on, and then the group members are all listed below. So I share that with the students and they can navigate from there. I spend my time kind of popping in and out of those Google Meet groups and check on their progress. I thought this would be more difficult than it actually ended up being. My students and I ended up using this pretty much every time we met live for kind of a remote synchronous learning session. And they really enjoyed that opportunity to be able to unmute and talk in an environment that wasn't so chaotic, right? It's hard to talk when there are 30 people in a meet, but when there's 4, it's a lot easier. So Google Meet groups to do all sorts of things. I love virtual escape rooms. I was talking to some of my GEG colleagues about how I asked for my birthday for my husband to create me an escape room. I love escape rooms, love to do them with our students virtually, and I'll show you that on the next slide. Puzzles, we do debates over small groups on Google Meets. They have book club discussions, small group discussions. There's a lot that you can do virtually in small groups as well. Here's just that little demo of a virtual, and I don't know what whether to call it, like a treasure hunt or scavenger hunt or escape room, but using a Google form as a kind of key, like lock codes, and they have to type a certain answer into the Google form before they can move on to the next section. In this case, they were linked to a Google Earth image and asked how many red cars were in the parking lot, and then they were going to take that red car kind of further on their journey. So if you're interested and have not yet engaged in the wonderful world of virtual escape room, there's a link in the notes about how to set this up. When I do it remotely with my students, I have the last page always be a code word for them to come back to the Google Meet and tell me, and that's how I know that they're done, and that's how I know like who wins the virtual escape room or who breaks free before the time is up. Another activity on applied digital skills to walk students through brainstorming. This one uses Google Drawings rather than Jamboard, but I think either could be pretty easily interchangeable, but teaching them how to collaborate on a document online and how to brainstorm together in a group. So another thing you might consider, and what they're brainstorming, I think is kind of up to you. And that's going to bring us now into the part of the session where I want to talk a little bit about how to engage students when you're actually delivering instruction. A lot of what I've said up until this point, you could definitely kind of piece into your instruction, but specifically when delivering instruction for students remotely, I'll start by talking about asynchronous learning. This means your students at home for the day, you've posted a piece of work for them, and they're navigating that independently. I almost always facilitate asynchronous learning through a Google slide deck. So the students are kind of walking through each slide, and it chunks out those steps step by step. And it also helps chunk information, so they're not getting a whole big Google Doc just blocked with text. I like Google Slides for that reason. And then I'm almost always starting with a piece of direct instruction where I'm recording that video myself. And I'm also turning that embedded webcam on. I didn't used to do this because I didn't love being on video, but studies show that students are more likely to engage in work online if they can see the teacher's face. I think we all want to be reminded that there's like a live human being who cares about us and our learning. And so in this case, the more your students can see your face, the better. And I use this principle with direct asynchronous instruction. And I also do that for building community. I post a lot of selfies of myself on the Google Classroom stream, just as a reminder, like, hey, I'm your teacher. I'm still here. This isn't a robot posting work. It's still me. So as awkward as it might be, get comfortable with using that video and taking those selfies. I use Screencastify. Heard a lot of good things recently about Loom. And there's a lot of other screen recording tools that you can use to record that direct instruction for your students. A lot of times I'm going through a slide deck just like this, walking them through the lesson or walking them through the instructions for that day and demoing how to do that on Screencastify. Then I have found that students like to not watch videos in asynchronous learning, unfortunately, unless they're held accountable to do so. So consider using a tool like Edpuzzle, which will allow you to, upload that video and embed questions directly into it. or consider doing some video formatting directly within your Google slide deck itself. In this case, I could go to within Google Slides, insert video. And I always do caps because that's easy to spell. And we like cats. And I can select a video directly within YouTube, but probably it's like something way more boring, like subject-verb agreement. And I would put that video onto one half of the slide. Over here on the right-hand side, I have this format option column, and I just give them a chunk of video at a time. So I say we're going to start at 0, and we're not going to watch 6 minutes because nobody can watch 6 minutes at a time, right? We have like TikTok attention spans. We're going to watch the first 1 minute. Then your video will, oops, hold on. There it goes, 1 minute. You just have to make sure that, yeah, there it goes. Then I ask them a comprehension question about that 1 minute of video. So usually I'm inserting a table, just like a 2-column table here. And I ask my question at the top. Ta-da. And then I say answer here. And I'm using these Google slide decks, again, as my asynchronous lesson. So in Google Classroom, I'm assigning the slides as the lesson with a make a copy for each student. So each student has their own slides. They're all going to be answering their own questions on their own slides. Then here I have this video selected. I can duplicate it. And on the next one down, I can do that video formatting again. And I can say, okay, the next part of the video you're going to watch from 1 minute to 2 minutes. And I'm going to ask a different question about that. You'll see when you're presenting these for students and they're watching the videos, this second video down, when you click play and watch the bottom, you'll see it's going to jump to that 1 minute mark. Adorable. And it will stop itself at the 2 minute mark. So just a way to make sure that when you are having your students watch your videos that you took a lot of time working on, that they're actually watching them. Hold them accountable for doing that, either within the slides themselves or on a tool like Edpuzzle. And then after that, you know, the sky's the limit in terms of what I'm having them do to create with their learning, to assess them, to have them play, explore. I love WeVideo and Flipgrid and Padlet and Escape Rooms and Kami and TorqueReader and Quizlet and Jamboard and Parlay and ThingLink and Quizzes and all of these, and they're all linked into the slides that you have. You know, we all make these second careers out of learning about all of these tools. So there's so much to do with your students online in an asynchronous lesson, right? Give them the content and then have them go create with that content, have them go explore with it. Yeah, I'll just leave that there because it's really easy to get overwhelmed as well. So take it one piece at a time, choose one tool that you think would work well in your classroom, practice that, master that, and then learn about something new because there's just so much. Another thing that I'll do oftentimes in these asynchronous lessons is I'll give them a choice about how to explore with that learning. So here's an example of a choice board I actually don't use anymore because I found this is way too many choices to give to students. Instead, I found about 2 to 3 choices is usually ideal. It's like that salad dressing principle, right? We don't want a whole wall of salad dressing. We just want a couple to choose from. So in this case, I've given my students 3 different choices about how they can engage with our lesson that I filmed on Screencastify about mood. But in this case, I've given them an option that's really no tech related. So if your students don't have great internet connection, if they don't have multiple devices at their home that they can share, right? They can draw, they can paint, they can do something tactile and take a photo of it. Then something low tech for students who just maybe have the technology but aren't as comfortable with their skills. In this case, creating a slide presentation, and then a really high-tech option for some of my, super high achievers, the kids who like to push themselves to create a video. And I'm always surprised. I always get a huge range of what students choose, and they tend to really appreciate and engage with that option and that choice. And then the other thing I'd really like to consider when students are doing asynchronous learning is, how do I get them to connect to each other despite the fact that they're all at home and despite the fact that they're all working on things at different times? So using the collaborative features of tools like Google Docs and Google Slides, having them comment on pieces and they can read and respond to those comments, or using a Google Classroom question, using a Padlet, right? Some sort of collaborative tool, Flipgrid, to get them communicating with each other. Another thing I'll just kind of offer into the world is, if we are all going to a hybrid model where students are at home for part of the week, can you offer a point of connection during that day between the students who are at home and the students who are in class? So even if it's not going through a full lesson together, can you jump on Meet in the classroom and have like a morning hello? I don't know what you call that in elementary school, like a circle, carpet circle? I just usually call them like community check-in with my students. So can we provide an option for students who are at home to join into community check-in with the students who are at school, just for 5 minutes, so that we can continue to kind of maintain those relationships? And so that then when you are asking students to comment on each other's work and talk on Flipgrid, they have those relationships with group B if they're group A, right? And they're not spending as much physical time together as they used to be. And then I'll also just mention, whenever you're creating lessons in an asynchronous space, just make sure to keep design in mind. It's that like eating with our eyes principle. You don't want to just throw text onto a slide deck or throw text into your Schoology platform, but choose colors and fonts carefully. Try not to give more than 3 pieces of information at a time, and use your negative space, your white space, really wisely. This advice comes from Michelle Eaton. She has a book called The Perfect Blend, which is very brilliant in terms of like designing digital learning. And then, of course, using your templates. So using slide templates or using HyperDoc templates to save you some of that time doing the actual design work yourself. And that brings me to the end of part, I don't remember where we are, part 4.
I actually do have some really good questions here that people were wondering about that. So one of the first questions was, with the 3 choices, do you have a different grading scale for the more detailed choices?
No, only because I'm really trying to grade like on a standards-based place, from a standards-based place, where I tell them the standard that I want them to meet. And it's usually like, show evidence that you know how mood applies in this book. And then in terms of the actual work they produce, I'm looking less at their technical skills. I'm not really looking at their ability to make a video, but I'm looking, do you understand what mood is?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then another one was, and how, let's see, giving some tips on giving more meaningful feedback to students. Do you have any tips on like how you give meaningful feedback to students?
I have some tips about how students can give meaningful feedback to each other. I can post into our slide deck at the end. There's this great article by a woman named, I think her name is Elaine Plybon. And she just recommends like really structuring how you have students communicate with each other. So she has examples like the last word activity, where you ask students to just post one word or one phrase to their classmates that represents to them, you know, I'm trying to explain it, like what they got from their post or what they got. So they could call it, you know, like, I'm having trouble thinking of ideas, but anyway. And then the original students comment on that, and then the first student comments back. So it's just a really structured way to give feedback, instead of just getting like, great work and like, good job, and I like this, because that's what you'll get if you don't structure it. So I'll post that after we're done here today. And then in terms of like the teacher giving meaningful feedback, I
think the same thing. Yeah, you want it to be structured as well.
Yeah, and really specific. So I really try to pick specific things, like I like this sentence and here's why, so that they know like I'm actually reading it, I'm actually engaging with it. Sometimes I type it in a private comment. Sometimes I use a tool like Mote, and I'll leave it verbally. But yeah.
And then someone said, so because when you were mentioning that at the beginning about, what were we talking about at the beginning? No, I've lost my train of thought. But you were talking about it and you said, so they said, so content knowledge, not digital skill knowledge, when you were talking about the knowing about what to do with the 3 choices and whatever.
Yeah, I grade on content only.
Yeah.
Like, I'm very rarely grading on your digital skills because I'm not a technology teacher. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, those are some great ones.
Cool. All right, so we're kind of cruising into the last 5 minutes, and I have so much I could say. I could just talk forever, but I'll just kind of go through a little more quickly in the rest of the resources I have. And again, just for you to explore later. In terms of engaging students synchronously online, might be less important if we are teaching in a hybrid environment and you're not having to actually teach over Google Meet, like a lot of us were doing in the fall. But I just like to recommend still start with that community check-in, check in how you see how your students are doing, give them some time to socialize, either with their microphones off or on, or in the chat box. Do a little movement activity, because when we're sitting in front of our computers all day, it stinks. So I like to use like Go Noodle or Super Mover videos. I also like to use GIFs. So like, here's just a little move we can all do right now. And that's really easy to find and put into your slides. Breathing activities, the same. So we watch a GIF to breathe in and hold. Everyone should do this because it feels good. And breathe out. And we usually do that before we start class. And there's also extensions you can use, like Move It, that will like in random intervals pop up and say, okay, now you need to make 10 large circles with your arm. So sometimes we'll use that just to make sure we're still moving during the day. I really have a lot of systems for making sure students stay engaged in the chat box, as well as using Pear Deck. If I am teaching ever, whether it's online or in the classroom, I pretty much always use Pear Deck. I think a lot of you, it sounds like, are familiar and use Pear Deck. For those who aren't, it's just the ability to add these interactive questions directly into your Google Slides, where the students can answer on their individual devices. And then as a teacher, you can see those answers from the back end. So you're getting immediate formative information about how your students are understanding. So using the drag and drop tool, using the multiple choice tool. And then I'll just mention this one because I love it. Every single Pear Deck I do, no matter how old, no matter how long it is, we always do a 1-minute express yourself where I give students a completely blank white slide, turn the drawing feature on, and they get to draw whatever they want for the class. And then we always end Pear Deck by looking at everybody's drawings, which is fun. And again, the name of the game is engaging. We want it to be fun. We want them to want to do it. I did mention group work already. Another link here to how I facilitate that on Google Meet. And then sometimes I do use a tool called Parlay. It is a kind of discussion tool that you can either use asynchronously, where students are typing in a chat room style to each other. But the feature I really love is the synchronous discussion tool, where you're kind of in a platform when everybody gets this toolbar and they can, it's called tapping in, and their little emoji or avatar will move itself into the center of the screen when they have a new idea or when they have a question. And it just helps you as the teacher facilitate a discussion online when it's hard to see hands raised and when it's hard to, ask students to be muting and unmuting their mics. So I use Parlay whenever we're having a whole group discussion, and I'll kind of do it like, all right, it looks like Taylor has a new idea. Taylor, go ahead and unmute. And then Taylor will talk, and then I'll say, oh, I see that Ivan wants to challenge that idea. So Ivan, why don't you go ahead? And I kind of just help facilitate discussions using that tool called Parlay. And I'm going to skip questions and go right to the end. Couple of ideas about staying engaged. Virtual assemblies is something we've done at our school. This was a readathon day where our entire school joined on a Google Meet or on a webinar. And we had teachers dress up as different book characters, and everyone guessed who they were in the comment box. We had a local author join us and read a story. And then we gave them a choice board of activities of how they then engaged in their reading for the rest of the day. We also do virtual field trips on YouTube or Google Expeditions or Tour Creator. CoSpaces is another really neat virtual reality space. It's all animated, which kind of allows you to kind of like bring things into a more fantastical world. I like to use CoSpaces to create dystopian realities with my 8th graders. And we also do Spirit Week on Padlet. So each day of the week is a different day that they post pictures to on Padlet. And then the last two, I think, just talk about how to connect to a greater community. Now that we're all getting more comfortable with tools like Google Meet and more comfortable with online spaces, we can more easily connect with classrooms all over the world and find those authentic audiences for our work and find those authentic discussions with classrooms all over the world. So there's a website called Classroom Bridges where you can like post your classroom and connect with other teachers. And there's also a website called Pen Pal Schools that it's just basically like collaborative workspace where you can have conversations with other students in a topic. And then at the end, I just have some just for fun in terms of staying engaged games that you could play with your students or that you could post for your students. Again, if you can get them to the learning management system, or if you can get them on Google Meet, they're one step closer to doing the work. I've said a super lot, and I'm already a minute over. My husband calls my time Emma time because I'm about 5 minutes late to anything I do. So if I could just take one more minute of Emma time to talk about a project I'm working on. I've spent pretty much the whole summer talking about this kind of stuff and doing a lot of trainings for teachers. And I found that a lot of the information I was giving again and again. So I put it all into a survival guide. Is going to be available on July 5th. You can sign up now on bit.ly/hybrid teacher. I'm going to be offering this survival guide for free for educators. It has everything I talked about today, and then a whole lot more about how to teach either in a hybrid environment, in a remote environment, or a lot of it applies just to teaching in general. My hope is that it turns into a real book at some point. I'm in talks with a publisher about that. So my other hope is that people will buy the book later, but we all need knowledge now about how to teach in the fall. So I'm offering it for free as a PDF download on July 15th, and you can find it at bit.ly/hybrid teacher. Whew, and then I'm done.
Emma, that was seriously amazing. I am over here writing down things on the side. Parlay, oh man, cause spaces, oh, pen pal schools. I'm writing them. I'm like, I absolutely love it. And you have got some overwhelming people in here that are saying how they loved your session and they are ready for a part 2. So I think we should talk about a part 2 because I think people want you back.
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. It's really my goal. Like, I want to help teachers because I want to help kids. And so if that's what we're doing, then I'm happy.
Absolutely. And then your hybrid guide, amazing. I wrote that down also. We put it in the chat for everyone to go ahead and sign up and get that, because honestly, we know that as teachers, we do a lot of work for free. And this is just amazing that you're sharing this information with us without having anything behind it.
Yeah, just hope that it's a real book one day and you'll buy it.
Right, giving us a teaser. I think you've got it though. Everybody wants you here. So.
And it's more than a teaser. It's like 110 pages long. So just get ready for that. It's a lot.
I think we are going to love it. So I am absolutely loving all the things you said. I cannot imagine this being any better than it was. So thank you so much, Emma. I can not thank you enough for taking a whim and just saying, hey, yeah, I'll do one July 6th. Your group. Again, we love you. This is amazing, and stay tuned for part 2.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.